What's up, everyone? The football therapist here, talking week 2 fantasy starts and sits. We're going to be breaking up the videos by positions. We'll be doing quarterbacks and tight ends. So let's get to the match. Thursday night's matchup is Cincinnati and Cleveland. And for me, I'm starting Austin Hooper. The Cincinnati Bengals just are not good against tight ends. We saw it again last week. Hunter Henry put up tight end 1 numbers. So to me, he's the type of guy you got to start. Plus, Njoku is out for a couple weeks on IR. So put him in your lineups and hope that he has a quality week this week. I'm going to be sitting Joe Burrow, also CJ Utsama. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Joe Burrow, to me, he had a quality game in terms of NFL, but I'm just not ready to start the rookie for fantasy. He kind of struggled at times, and this is another quality defense. As for Baker Mayfield, he did not look good last week. I expect him to lean on the run game a little bit more. Game script kind of worked against him. So I would not be starting Baker Mayfield against a Cincinnati defense that kind of looked improved last week. First Sunday game we're going to talk about is the Giants in Chicago. This is another game where I'm going to start Evan Engram. I know he had a poor showing in week 1, but that whole Giants offense kind of was hit or miss any given drive. Going against Chicago, another tough defense, I feel kind of confident starting him. He kind of missed a touchdown there at the beginning, a little miscommunication between him and Danny Dimes. Hopefully they get back on track, being that this is week 2. Speaking of Daniel Jones, I'm going to sit him. I don't trust this offensive line. This offense kind of looks sluggish in general. Going against a very good defense in Chicago, it worries me to put him in your starting lineup. So I would personally sit him. And as for Mitch Trubisky and Jimmy Graham, both of these guys had quality fantasy starts last week. Mitch Trubisky really had a good fourth quarter, but I still don't feel confident starting him. I know the Giants' defense isn't the best, but we know Mitch Trubisky is kind of hit or miss, so I personally would leave him on the bench. And again, the volume wasn't really there for Jimmy Graham. He had a touchdown. I personally would look for other options. Game number 3, Atlanta and Dallas, and you got to start the quarterbacks. This is going to be a high-scoring affair, in my opinion. Last week, the Seahawks torched Atlanta, so I'm expecting a big bounce-back performance for Dak Prescott. He has all those weapons. Hopefully they can get in sync, and that offensive line really needs to improve for him to do well. On the Falcons side, Matt Ryan, of course, is a start. They're going to be passing a ton. He has all these weapons. And I'm going to put Hayden Hurst in the lineup one more time. Yes, he was a bit of a letdown last week, but I still expect him to do well this season. And I think in this type of game where it could be a lot of offensive attack, I think that he could potentially get a touchdown in this game. And I'm sitting Blake Bell with Jarwin done for the year. There's no real need to start any Dallas tight ends. Detroit and Green Bay. For me, you got to start Matthew Stafford. You got to start TJ Hawkinson. I think that both of these guys will have quality weeks. Green Bay's defense kind of gave up a good amount of points last week. Yes, they were mostly garbage time, but to me, Matthew Stafford and TJ Hawkinson could have a big week, especially if Kenny Golladay is out. We'll have to monitor that. And then Aaron Rodgers looked terrific last week. This Lions secondary kind of let up at the end of the game last week. And going against Devontae Adams, I don't think there's anyone that could cover him right now. I think Rodgers will have a great week. And I personally will be sitting all Packers tight ends. Jacksonville and Tennessee. You got to love what you saw with Gardner Minshew last week. I think he could be the real deal. I was very high on him as a QB2. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup, so if you have to start him in deeper leagues or superflex leagues, definitely do so, as he seems to be very hot after that game. But if not, I would look for other options. And for the Jacksonville side, I'm starting Jonnu Smith. He kind of broke out week one, had a top 10 PPR performance. I love what they did with him, spreading him around the field. Ryan Tannehill, just like Minshew, in deeper leagues, maybe consider starting him, as the Jacksonville defense kind of gave up a lot through the air last week at times. Yet, I am expecting a very run heavy game by Tennessee, as Derrick Henry has historically done well against Jacksonville. Tyler Eifert, I would sit. There's no real reason to start him this week. Minnesota and Indianapolis, I would start Kirk Cousins. I think that the Indianapolis defense gave up a lot through the air last week. We saw it. Gardner Minshew had an almost near perfect game to me. So I would feel confident starting Kirk Cousins. I think that Adam Thielen has another big game, and hopefully they could get some of the other pass catchers involved. On the other side of the ball, Phillip Rivers and Jack Doyle, both guys to me are starts here. We saw what Aaron Rodgers did last week to the Minnesota defense. We kind of thought that Minnesota's secondary would struggle at times, and to me, I would feel somewhat confident starting these guys in your lineups, as what we saw last week against Minnesota could be the trend for this year. And I'm personally sitting Irv Smith Jr. and Kyle Rudolph. I don't really trust any of those tight ends in my lineup. We saw the split last week. No one really did anything at that position, so I would sit both of those guys. Buffalo and Miami, I would start Josh Allen. I think he has that rushing upside that we saw last week. I think he has another quality game. And with that rushing upside, his floor is just really safe every single week. So start him confidently. For Miami, I personally am sitting Ryan Fitzpatrick and Mike Gesicki. Kind of a really tough matchup last week against the Patriots. They struggled. This week, even better defense in my opinion. I don't trust both of those guys in my lineup. Of course, I'm very high still on Mike Gesicki. I think that he can have a quality season, but unless they make a quarterback change or Fitzpatrick starts hitting his stride, I think this offense is going to struggle early in this year. And Dawson Knox, I just don't feel confident starting him yet, as we haven't seen the big production for him at that position. San Francisco and New York Jets. This is going to be an interesting game for me. Of course, George Kittle a little banged up. Monitor the injury. Hopefully he plays. He'll be a start if he plays. But of course, if he's out, do not start him. Jimmy G, I talked about this last week. He kind of struggled not having many weapons. Of course, the Arizona defense is a lot better to me than the Jets. But if he doesn't have his wide receivers, if he doesn't have Kittle, they're going to lean on the ground game. And of course, he did have a decent performance last week in terms of fantasy stats, but it was really inflated by that one big pass play broken by Raheem Mostert. And then the Jets, you just can't start them against this top-notch defense. Philadelphia and the Rams. This game is going to be a slugfest, in my opinion. Of course, Zach Ertz, you have to start. To me, there's not many targets going around to these receivers, and this offensive line struggled a lot last week. I assume that Carson Wentz is going to lean on his tight ends. And that's why I also think Dallas Goedert could be a really good start. Yes, he finishes the tight end one last week. I don't know if we can expect that every single week, considering that Zach Ertz is still there. But for the time being, I put a little star there. If you don't have any other options, start him confidently and hope that he could give you a very good performance again. The reason why I'm sitting Carson Wentz is because I don't trust this offensive line yet. If Lane Johnson is healthy, maybe he could be a start. But just like with last week with Washington, the Rams have a really good defensive front, and I think that they could cause a lot of trouble this week for this Eagles team. I'm personally sitting Jared Goff right now. He did not look that well last week as they leaned on the run a ton. I think potentially he could put up slightly better numbers, but to me, you have to have better starting options here. And then Higbee, Everett. None of these guys really had a solid week last week. The splits were kind of almost even based on snap count. I personally would not start any of these guys going against a very good Eagles defense. Denver at Pittsburgh, to me, Noah Fant. He's going to be a start almost every single week. He's the guy until Courtland Sutton comes back. I would feel confident starting him in your lineups. And then Big Ben had a really good week one. I think that we see him spread it around a lot like he did. I think we could see a couple of touchdowns. I think he could be a really good start. On the other side, Drew Lock, I'm not starting this week. He kind of struggled against a very good Tennessee defense last week. He didn't put up any big numbers against a better Steelers defense that kind of ripped the Giants apart. I worry about this Denver offense going into week 2. Then Eric Ebron, I'm personally sitting. Again, I just don't trust him enough to put him in my lineup right now. He had an okay performance in week 1 with a couple of solid catches, but the Steelers are going to spread it around, and I think we know they have so many good weapons that Ebron may not be a good start any given week this year, depending on how much they're spreading the ball around. Carolina and Tampa Bay, I'm starting both Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. I know they had a rough game last week offensively, but Brady still scored 3 touchdowns. He still put up QB1 numbers or fringe QB1 numbers. I think he still has to be a start. And then with Rob Gronkowski, I think he will get a touchdown in this game. Carolina's defense struggled a lot, and Waller had a pretty decent performance last week. I think Gronk can put up similar numbers and be a fringe tight end one play. For Carolina, I don't really trust Teddy Bridgewater against this defense. Listen, I know the score was kind of high, but Tampa Bay's defense looked very sharp last week, especially that secondary. The Saints' offense kind of struggled for most of the game, and I would expect a similar thing for Carolina. Ian Thomas as well, I'm not looking to start him. He has no real value right now to me in that offense. Washington and Arizona, you got to start Kyler Murray. Again, with rushing quarterbacks, he has a very safe floor. And to me, he's going to have to run a lot. We saw what Washington did last week with their pass rush. Kyler Murray actually will do well, in my opinion, because he faces teams like San Francisco and Seattle regularly. And last year and even this year, he's put up quality numbers against those type of defenses. So the mobility has really helped him. So I would definitely start him. As for the rest of the players, Dwayne Haskins, I would not start. I do not feel comfortable putting him in my lineup just yet. And the tight ends in this game won't really have an impact to me. Last few games here, and for the Kansas City Chiefs, you have to start Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce every single week. They are pretty much matchup proof. There's no reason you should put them on your bench unless it's their bye. Hope for top 1 to 3 numbers any given week of the season. Hunter Henry for me is a start for the Chargers. I feel that even though this Chargers pass attack struggled last week, he had some really good looks. He ended up a tight end 1. He also had 2 top 10 performances against the Chiefs last year, so start him. I'm going to be benching Tyrod Taylor. There's just no reason to start him. I'm not comfortable starting him in this position when there's plenty of other options out there. Baltimore and Houston, to me, you have to start both quarterbacks here. I know the Houston Texans offense didn't look that good last week, but they still are really good skill-wise, in my opinion. And Deshaun Watson has that rushing upside. I think that he could get a touchdown or 2 in this game on the ground. And I think this receiving core steps up a little bit more than we saw last week. Obviously, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are both starts for me. Jackson, just like Mahomes, feels like he's matchup proof. He has that big rushing upside. And his favorite target is Mark Andrews. Andrews had another big week last week, so keep him rolling in your lineup. For the Texans, I'm not going to start Darren Fells or Jordan Atkins. I feel like both tight ends can contribute, but I don't feel safe starting any of them in my lineup. New England at Seattle, I'm going to start Russell Wilson and Cam Newton. I think both quarterbacks have good games. Russell Wilson has a lot of weapons on the outside to me with Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I know this New England secondary is really good, but again, Russell Wilson is a guy that you have to start in your lineup safely due to the fact that he has the ability to give you top 3 numbers any given week. He also has that rushing upside as well that could potentially give you a rushing score or a very good number of rushing yards any given week. Cam Newton, he's going to run the ball. We saw it last week. The Patriots changed up their whole offensive scheme. I expect them to get a couple of rushing touchdowns in this game. It should be a great matchup. I won't be starting Greg Olsen this week. Like I said, the Patriots secondary is very good, and I just don't feel confident starting Olsen. I think that Seattle tries to lean on the run a little bit more, and I think Metcalf and Tyler Lockett will be the guys to score potentially in this game. And again, the Patriots tight ends, there's no one I really want to start in that matchup. Lastly, New Orleans and Las Vegas, the Monday night game. I'm going to start Drew Brees. I know he had a little rough outing last week. New Orleans, they typically have those games every year where the offense just doesn't produce. Now Tampa Bay is a much better defense to me than Las Vegas, so I'd feel a lot more confident starting Drew Brees against Las Vegas. And I'm going to start Jared Cook. Currently, Michael Thomas, he has that sprained ankle. His status at this time of the video is up in the air. So if he doesn't go, Jared Cook will get a lot of looks. And like I said, this Las Vegas defense isn't as good as the Buccaneers defense last week. Then you got to start Darren Waller. I think that he will have a really good week. Henry Ruggs a little banged up. So I think if the Las Vegas Raiders want to pass a little bit more this game, Waller is going to have to step up and be that target monster to me. And again, I'm not really interested in starting Derek Carr. I was last week, but they ran a lot and they had a lot of success with Josh Jacobs. And New Orleans, their defense looked pretty good. So although I think a guy like Waller can put in a quality game, I'm not really trusting this passing attack overall. So thank you guys for watching this video. Subscribe if you can, and we'll be back tomorrow with the running backs.